Okay, today we are solving quadratic equations by factoring. So last class we learned how to factor. Today we're just essentially factoring, and we have an added step where we are going to solve for the variable after we have factored the quadratic. So we have three basic steps when we do this. Step one is to make sure the equation is equal to 0 if it's not already. After we make sure the equation is equal to 0, then we're going to factor the left side of the equation, just like we factored last class. And then step 3, after we factor, is to solve for x. We also want to make sure when our equation is equal to 0 that the left side is in standard form. So we talked about standard form before. We want to make sure our terms are ax squared and then bx and then c. So the x squared term should always be first, and then the x term, and then the constant term. So we always want it in standard form equal to 0. Then we factor, then we solve for x. So let's look at example 1. This one's equal to 0, so we're good there. It's also in standard form, so we can go ahead and do step 2, which is to factor our quadratic. There's a 1 in front, so remember we always multiply the front number by the last number. 1 times negative 18 is negative 18. So we're going to find factors of negative 18. So some that come to mind are 6 and negative 3, negative 6 and positive 3. I could have 18 and negative 1, negative 18 and positive 1. My factors need to add up to whatever b is. Well, b is 3. So 6 plus negative 3 gives me 3. So here are my winners. I'm going to write it as my factors. X plus 6 and x minus 3. Okay, I factored. It's still equal to 0. Now we have that extra step today where we're going to solve for x. So we're going to take both of our factors and set them equal to 0. So I set up two separate equations. So I take this, what's inside this parenthesis, put it equal to 0. And then I take what's inside this parenthesis and I put that equal to 0 as well. So now I have two equations and I need to solve those for x. So if I'm solving this first equation right here for x, I would need to do the opposite and subtract 6 from both sides. X comes down, 0 minus 6 is negative 6. So here's one of my solutions. This one, if I have negative 3, I'm going to add 3 to the other side. X comes down, 0 plus 3 is positive 3. Here's my second solution. So I might have two solutions when I do these. Sometimes I might only have one. So you could either have 2 or 1 solutions. Most of the time we'll probably have 2. Okay? Let's look at the next one. This one says 4x squared minus 4x equals negative 1. So step 1 is to get our equation equal to 0 if it isn't already equal to 0. This one's equal to negative 1. So to get it equal to 0, we can go ahead and add 1 over to the other side. We want to make sure we write it in standard form, so 4x squared, then minus 4x, and then the positive 1. I do not have any like terms, so nothing gets combined over here on this side. I just write it out as its 3 terms. It's now equal to 0, so we can go ahead and factor. This one has a 4 in front, so we need to make sure we multiply that 4 by the 1 at the end. 4 times 1 is 4. So I'm finding factors of 4. There aren't very many, so I have 4 and 1, or they could both be negative, or 2 and 2, or they can both be negative. Has to add up to negative 4. So negative 2 and negative 2 add up to negative 4. So here are my factors. So I'm going to write x minus 2 equals 0 still. Okay, remember, if you have a number other than 1 out in front, this number needs to go under those 2's. So I've created two fractions here, and now I need to reduce them if I can. 2 over 4 reduces to 1 over 2. And this is the same exact thing. Okay, after I reduce, if I still have a fraction rather than a whole number, I'm going to put the denominator in front of x. So it'll become 2x minus 1. Same thing here, 2x minus 1. Okay, it's completely factored and we are ready to solve. So I'm going to take 2x minus 1, put it equal to 0. If you notice, these are exactly the same. When that happens, you really only need to solve one of them. There's no point in solving both of them because you're going to get the same exact answer. So this is a situation where you're only going to have one answer instead of two. So I really just need to solve it once. I'm going to add the 1 over. I still have 2x equals 0 plus 1 is 1. And then I have another step of dividing this 2. Okay, just leave it as a fraction. So x equals 1/2. All right, let's look at example 3. This one equals 20x instead of 0. So again, we always need to get it equal to 0 before we factor. So we're going to move this over to this side. If it's positive, we will subtract it. Make sure you write this side in standard form. So it will become 2x squared, and then the minus 20x, and then the 50. Okay, we are ready to factor. If you notice, these three terms have a GCF of 2. So before we multiply 2 and 50, we can go ahead and divide these all by 2, and it will make it a little bit easier when we factor. So we're going to divide out 2, or factor out the GCF of 2. So we put that 2 in front. I put what I get when I divide all of these by 2 right here in parentheses. So 2x squared divided by 2 is x squared. Negative 20x divided by 2 is negative 10x. And then positive 50 divided by 2 is positive 25. Okay, we are now factoring this part in the parentheses. Now we have that 1 in front. So 1 times 25 is 25. And I come up with factors of 25. 5 and 5, negative 5, negative 5, 25 and 1. Trying to figure out what multiplies, or adds up rather, to negative 10, which will be negative 5 and negative 5. This 2 is still out in front. I'm going to split this into my 2 parentheses. They're both negative 5s, so x minus 5 and x minus 5. Okay, it's completely factored. We're ready to solve. This 2 out in front, when I go to solve, if I try and set that equal to 0, it's one of my factors, so I want to try it. If I have 2 equals 0, I don't have a variable to solve for. So in this situation, the number that's outside kind of just disappears, goes away. It's not going to give us a solution. If there were to be a variable with it, like 2x, then I would be able to solve that for x. I would just divide by 2 and x would be equal to 0. But since there's no variable, I'm going to skip over to the x minus 5. Okay, this one's similar to this one up here. These are exactly the same binomial, so I really just need to do it once. I don't need to solve both of them. I'll get the same thing. So I'm just going to solve one of them, and I add 5 over, and so I get x equals positive 5. So just one solution on that one as well. And let's look at the last one. Okay, it's equal to 0, so I don't need to do that step. It's in standard form, and I don't have a GCF to divide out. So we're going to go ahead and factor. We're going to multiply 5 and 6, which is 30. And we're going to find some factors of 30. 10 and 3, 30 and 1. They could also both be negative, negative 10, negative 3, 15 and 2. Okay, it has to add up to negative 13. So here are my two numbers that are going to work. So let's split it up. X minus 10, x minus 3 equals 0. We're going to take the 5 that was out in front, and it's going to go under the 10 and under the 3. Okay, we're going to try and reduce. 10 over 5 is just 2, so this will be x minus 2. 3 over 5 cannot be reduced, so since the 5 is still in the bottom, it's going to go in front of x. So this one will be 5x minus 3 equals 0. I've factored. I'm ready for step 3 where I'm going to solve. So I'm going to take inside this parenthesis the x minus 2 and put it equal to 0. And I'm going to take this one, 5x minus 3, put it equal to 0. Let's solve this for x. So we're going to add 2. X equals 2. This one, I'm going to add 3 first. Bring 5x down, 0 plus 3 is 3, and then we have to divide this 5. So you can just leave it as a fraction, x equals 3 over 5. Okay, that is solving by factoring.